This morning, instead of giving a talk, as usual, I thought I'd read passages from a book which I recently have read. The name of the book is An Interrupted Life, The Diaries of Etty Hillesum, 1941 to 43. Since there are so many passages, I will say very little about it. Let her words speak for themselves. There's just a few passages from the introduction. The person who edited this diary says here, between her entry for Thursday, 10th of November 1941, quote, mortal fear in every fiber, complete collapse, lack of self-confidence, aversion, panic, and that of Friday, 3rd of July 1942, very well then, this new certainty that what they are after is our total destruction. I accept it. I know it now, and I shall not burden others with my fears. I shall not be bitter if others fail to grasp what is happening to us Jews. I work and continue to live with the same conviction, and I find life meaningful. Yes, meaningful. Throughout the book, she writes about praying. At one time, she describes it as huddling in a corner by herself and not moving, just being with herself. And here is a quote in the introduction. When I pray, she writes, I hold a silly or naive or deadly serious dialogue with what is deepest inside me, which for convenience sake I shall call God. And later, and that probably best expresses my feeling for life, I repose in myself, and that part of myself, that deepest and richest part in which I repose, is what I call God. And later there's a quote, mysticism must rest on crystal clear honesty and can only come after things have been stripped down to their naked reality. A few biographical notes. She was 27 at the time she wrote the diary. She had been a student of many years of philosophy, languages, particularly Russian. She felt a deep calling to be a writer. Her favorite poet was Rilke, Rainer Maria Rilke. At the time of writing the diary, she was renting a room in a rooming house. She had an intimate relationship with the man who owned that house, and she also had an intimate relationship with another man who was some kind of a therapist of palm reading. Here are some more biographical notes. So far in this introduction, I have hardly mentioned the war. Intentionally, for Etty's diary is in the first place a journey through her inner world, and that inner world of hers is not governed by the threat of war. At the time she started writing, however, Holland was increasingly under the sway of Germany's reign of terror. After Holland's capitulation in May 1940, the Germans began gradually to isolate the Dutch Jews. When in February 41 the first anti-pogrom strike in European history broke out in Amsterdam, the Nazis intensified their pressure on the Jews and on any form of Dutch resistance. Jews were thrown out of their jobs, forbidden to buy in stores frequented by non-Jews, and otherwise maltreated. Ghettos were created and work camps set up. Then in April 42, the Jews were forced to wear the Star of David, and wholesale deportations began that spring. The Nazis wanted to move all Jews to Westerbork, a transit camp in the east of the Netherlands, not far from the German border. Though not in itself an extermination camp, Westerbork was in fact the last stop before Auschwitz. Of course, the shadow of these events falls over the diary as Etty too becomes more and more involved in the war. Through the influence of friends, Etty was given a job as a typist in one of the departments of the Jewish Council, an organization made up of 20 important Jews with a staff of several hundred people. As in other occupied countries, the council was formed at the instigation of the Germans to mediate between the Nazis and the mass of Jews. The Nazis gave orders to the council and then let it decide how to implement them. The council was under the illusion that by negotiation it could save the Jews from the worst. In this way it became a subtle weapon in the hands of the Nazis. Etty began work on July 15, 1942, at about the same time as a girl named Anne Frank, hidden in a house a few miles farther on, began writing her diary. For 14 days, Etty walked to the council headquarters at 93 Amstel and back again and called it hell. In the same month, the first big street roundup took place in Amsterdam, and voluntarily Etty decided to go with the trapped Jews to Westerbork. She did not want to escape the fate of the Jewish people. She believed that she could do justice to life only if she did not abandon those in danger, and if she used her strength to bring light into the life of others. Survivors from the camp has confirmed that Etty was a luminous personality to the last. From August 42 until September 43, Etty remained in Westerbork camp, working in the local hospital, but thanks to a special permit from the Jewish Council, she was able to travel to Amsterdam a dozen times. She brought letters and messages from people in Westerbork to Amsterdam and even to resistance groups, and picked up medicines to bring back. Etty's health was often very bad, and on one occasion she was hospitalized in Amsterdam during one of her leaves. The last part of her diary was written in Amsterdam after her first month in Westerbork. The camp was a community living in fear, doomed by the threat of the weekly transport train leaving for Poland. Etty's friend in Amsterdam tried to convince her that she had to hide, and once there was even an attempt to kidnap her. She refused. On September 7, 1943, Etty, her father and mother, and Misha were placed on transport. Out of a window of that train she threw a postcard, which was found and sent by farmers. "We have left the camp singing." A Red Cross report states that Etty died in Auschwitz on 30th November 1943. Her parents and Misha died there too. Her brother Jaap survived the camp but died on the way back to Holland. When you start reading the diary, you have not even any feeling that there is a war going on. Here I have hit upon something essential. Whenever I saw a beautiful flower, what I longed to do with it was press it to my heart and eat it all up. It was more difficult with a piece of beautiful scenery, but the feeling was the same. I was too sensual. I might almost write too greedy. I yearned physically for all I thought was beautiful, wanted to own it. Hence that painful longing that could never be satisfied, the pining for something I thought unattainable, which I called my creative urge. I believe it was this powerful emotion that made me think I was born to produce great works. It all suddenly changed, God alone knows by what inner process, but it is different now. I realized it only this morning when I recalled my short walk to the skating club a few nights ago. It was dusk, soft hues in the sky, mysterious silhouettes of houses, trees alive with a light through the tracery of their branches, in short, enchanting. And then I knew precisely how I had felt in the past. Then all that beauty would have gone like a stab into my heart, and I would not have known what to do with the pain. Then I would have felt the need to write, to compose verses, but the words would still have refused to come. I would have felt utterly miserable, wallowed in the pain, and exhausted myself as a result. The experience would have sapped all my energy. Now I know it for what it was: mental masturbation. By that night, only just gone, I reacted quite differently. I felt that God's world was beautiful despite everything, but its beauty now filled me with joy. I was just as deeply moved by that mysterious still landscape in the dusk as I might have been before, but somehow I no longer wanted to own it. I went home invigorated and got back to work, and the scenery stayed with me in the background as a cloak about my soul, to put it poetically for once, but it no longer held me back. I no longer masturbated with it. Her work was studying and teaching Russian to students. She was also the secretary of this therapist who had a circle of people around him. Here she writes, June 8th, 41, Sunday morning, 9:30. I think I'll do it anyway. I'll turn inwards for half an hour each morning before work and listen to my inner voice, lose myself. You could also call it meditation. I'm still a bit wary of that word, but anyway, why not? A quiet half hour within yourself. It's not enough just to move your arms and legs and all the other muscles about in the bathroom each morning. Man is body and spirit, and half an hour of exercises combined with half an hour of meditation can set the tone for the whole day. But it's not so simple, that sort of quiet hour, in quotation marks. It has to be learned. A lot of unimportant inner litter and bits and pieces have to be swept out first. Even a small head can be piled high inside with irrelevant distractions. True, there may be edifying emotions and thoughts too, but the clutter is ever present. So let this be the aim of the meditation, to turn one's innermost being into a vast, empty plain with none of that treacherous undergrowth to impede the view, so that something of God can enter you and something of love too. Not the kind of love deluxe that you revel in deliciously for half an hour, taking pride in how sublime you feel, but the love you can apply to small, everyday things. I've become just a little stronger again. I can fight things out within myself. Your first impulse is always to get help from others, to think you can't make it, but then suddenly you notice that you've fought your way through and that you've pulled it all off by yourself, and that makes you stronger. Last Sunday, was it only a week ago, I had the desperate feeling that I was tied to him, and that because of that I was in for an utterly miserable time. But I pulled myself out of it, although I don't quite know how. Not by arguing it out with myself, but by tugging with all my mental strength at some imaginary rope. I threw all my weight behind it and stood my ground, and suddenly I felt that I was free again. And then there were those brief meetings in the evening at the bench on the Stadion Kade, shopping in town, which were of an intensity that, for me at least, it was greater than anything before. It was all thanks to that lack of attachment. All my love and sympathy and concern and happiness went out to him, but I made no more demands on him. I wanted nothing from him. I took him as he was and enjoyed him. He said that love of mankind is greater than love of one man, for when you love one person, you're merely loving yourself. He's a mature 55-year-old man and has reached a stage where he can love all mankind, having loved many individuals in the past. I am an ordinary 27-year-old girl, and I too am filled with love for all mankind, but for all I know, I shall always continue to be in search of my one man. And I wonder to what extent that is a handicap, a woman's handicap. Whether it is an ancient tradition from which she must liberate herself, or whether it is so much part of her very essence that she would be doing violence to herself if she bestowed her love on all mankind, instead of a single man. I can't see how the two can be combined. Perhaps that's why there are so few famous women scientists and artists. A woman always looks for the one man on whom she can bestow all her wisdom, warmth, love, and creative powers. She longs for a man, not for mankind. It's not at all simple, the role of women. Sometimes when I pass a woman in the street, so beautiful, well-groomed, wholly feminine, albeit dull woman, I completely lose my poise. Then I feel that my intellect, my struggle, my suffering are oppressive, ugly, unwomanly. Then I too want to be beautiful and dull, a desirable plaything for a man. It's typical that I always do end up wanting to be desired by a man, the ultimate confirmation of our worth and womanhood, but in fact, it is only a primitive instinct. Feelings of friendship, respect, and love for us as human beings, these are all very well, but don't we ultimately want men to desire us as women? It is almost too difficult for me to write down all I feel. The subject is infinitely complex, but it is altogether too important not to be discussed. There's nothing else for it. I shall have to solve my own problems. I always get the feeling that when I solve them for myself, I shall also have solved them for 1,000 other women. For that very reason, I must come to grips with myself. All this devouring of books from early youth has been nothing but laziness on my part. I allow others to formulate what I ought to be formulating myself. I keep seeking outside confirmation of what is hidden deep inside me, when I know that I can only reach clarity by using my own words. I really must abandon all that laziness, and particularly my inhibitions and insecurity, if I am ever to find myself and through myself find others. I must have clarity and I must learn to accept myself. Everything feels so heavy inside me, and I want so much to feel light. For years I've bottled everything up. It all goes into the same great reservoir, but it will all have to come out again, or I shall know that I have lived in vain, that I have taken from mankind and given nothing back. I sometimes feel I am a parasite, and that depresses me and makes me wonder if I lead any kind of useful life. Perhaps my purpose in life is to come to grips with myself, properly to grips with myself and everything that bothers and tortures me and clamors for inner solution and formulation. For these problems are not just mine alone, and if at the end of a long life I am able to give some form to the chaos inside me, I may well have fulfilled my own small purpose. Even while I write this down, my unconscious is protesting at such expressions as purpose and mankind and solution of problems. I find them pretentious. But then I'm such an ingenious and dull young woman, still so lacking in courage. No, my friend, you're not there yet by a long chalk. You ought really to be kept away from all the great philosophers until you've learned to take yourself a little bit more seriously. Sometimes I long for a convent cell with the sublime wisdom of centuries set out on bookshelves all along the wall and a view across the cornfields. There must be cornfields, and they must wave in the breeze. And there I would immerse myself in the wisdom of the ages and in myself. Then I might perhaps find peace and clarity. But that would be no great feat. It is right here in this very place, in the here and now, that I must find them. But it is also terribly difficult, and I feel so heavy-hearted. I think I'd better buy that melon first and take it to the Nevis tonight. That's also part of living, isn't it? Yes, we women, we foolish, idiotic, illogical women, we all seek paradise in the absolute. And yet my brain, my capable brain, tells me that there are no absolutes, that everything is relative, endlessly diverse, and in eternal motion, and that it is precisely for that reason that life is so exciting and fascinating, but also so very, very painful. We women want to perpetuate ourselves in a man. Yes, I want him to say, "Darling, you are the only one and I shall love you forevermore." I know, of course, that there is no such thing as eternal love, but unless he declares it for me, nothing else has meaning. And the stupid thing is that I don't really want him forever, or as the only one in my life, and yet I demand it of him. Do I demand absolute love from others because I'm unable to give it myself? And then I always expect the same level of intensity when I know from my own experience that it cannot last. And I take flight just as soon as I notice the other becoming lukewarm. That's an inferiority complex, of course, something like, if I can't inspire him enough to be on fire for me at all times, then I'd rather have nothing at all. And it's so damned illogical, I must rid myself of it. After all, I wouldn't know what to do if somebody really was on fire for me all day long. It would annoy me and bore me and make me feel tied down. Oh, Etty, Etty. Last night he said, "I believe I am your stepping stone to a truly great love." Strange, isn't it? For I have been a stepping stone for so many others. And while what he says may be true, somewhere it hurts terribly and his words trouble me greatly. I think I know why. I want him to be madly jealous at the thought that I have a great lover may enter my life one day. He must love me eternally and me alone. It's a kind of compulsion with me. During the last few days I've been feeling extremely sensual. Last night in particular, and when he rang up at 9 o'clock saying, "Would you still like to come over?" I went with joy and physical longing and surrender. But you're fooling yourself, my girl, if you think that it was all to do with sensuality, for we did not fly directly into each other's arms. First we talked, and I hung on his words, delighting in the clear and pertinent way he expressed himself, and feeling that I was learning an enormous amount. And truly this spiritual contact gives me much greater satisfaction than the physical one. Perhaps I tend to overrate the physical aspect, no doubt, because of the fairy tale that it is so feminine. Odd, isn't it? Right now I feel that all I want is to fling myself into his arm and just be a woman, or perhaps even less, just a piece of cherished flesh. I dwell too much on my sensuality. After all, it only lasts a few days at a time, this rising wave. And that little bit of sensuality is what I then try to project onto the whole of life until it overshadows all the rest. Then I need words of dedication like, "You alone forevermore." I'm sure I'm expressing myself badly, but the main thing is to get it down on paper. I dwell so much on the importance of sensuality because I tend to fan the little bit of warmth people now and then seek from each other with such exalted vows as, "I love you forever." Yet one should accept things as they are and not try to lift them to impossible heights. Only if you let them be will they reveal their true worth. Here's an entry. The great cranium of mankind, the vast intellect and great heart of mankind. All ideas, however opposed, spring from a single brain, the brain of mankind, of all mankind. I feel it is indivisible, and perhaps that explains why I am sometimes filled with a deep sense of harmony and peace despite the many clashes. One has to know all thoughts and let all emotions pass through one to judge what has been devised in that immense cranium and what has passed through that great heart. If I had to tell what made the greatest impression on me today, I would say Jan Bohl's great big purple chilblained hands. Somebody else was martyred today, that gentle boy from Kultura. I still remember how he used to play the mandolin. He had a nice girlfriend at the time. She had since become his wife, and there was also a child. He was one of the best, said Jan Bohl, in the crowded university corridor. They have finished him off. And Jan Romain and Thielroy and several more of the fragile old professors, They are now prisoners in the drafty barracks where they used to spend their summer holidays in a friendly guest house. They're not even allowed their own pajamas or anything else of their own. The idea is to demoralize them completely and to make them feel inferior. It was very gloomy at this morning's lectures. And yet it wasn't altogether depressing. There was one bright spot. A short, unexpected conversation with Jan Bull as we walked through the cold, narrow Langbroeksteeg and then waited at the tram stop. What is it in human beings that makes them want to destroy others? Jan asked bitterly. I said, human beings, you say, but remember that you're one yourself. And strangely enough, he seemed to acquiesce, grumpy, gruff old Jan. The rottenness of others is in us too, I continued to preach at him. I see no other solution, I really see no other solution than to turn inwards and to root out all the rottenness there. I no longer believe that we can change anything in the world until we have first changed ourselves. And that seems to me the only lesson to be learned from this war, that we must look into ourselves and nowhere else. And Jan, who so unexpectedly agreed with everything I said, was approachable and interested and no longer proffered any of his hard-boiled social theories. Instead, he said, yes, it is too easy to turn your hatred loose on the outside, to live for nothing but for the moment of revenge. We must try to do without that. We stood there in the cold waiting for the tram, Jan with his great purple chilblained hands and his toothache. Our professors are in prison, another of Jan's friends has been killed, and there are so many other sorrows, but all we said to each other was, it is too easy to feel vindictive. That really was the bright spot of today. Very early on Wednesday morning, a large group of us were crowded into the Gestapo hall, and at that moment the circumstances of all our lives were the same. All of us occupied the same space, the men behind the desk no less than those about to be questioned. What distinguished each one of us was only our inner attitudes. I noticed a young man with a sullen expression who paced up and down looking driven and harassed and making no attempt to hide his irritation. He kept looking for pretexts to shout at the helpless Jews. Take your hands out of your pockets and so on. I thought him more pitiable than those he shouted at, and those he shouted at I thought pitiable for being afraid of him. When it was my turn to stand in front of his desk, he bawled at me, what the hell is so funny? I wanted to say, nothing is funny here except you, but refrain. You're still smirking, he bawled again. And I, in all innocence, I didn't mean to, it's my usual expression. And he, don't give me that, get the hell out of here, his face saying, I'll deal with you later. And that was presumably meant to scare me to death, but the device was too transparent. I am not easily frightened, not because I'm brave, but because I know that I'm dealing with human beings, and that I must try as hard as I can to understand everything that anyone ever does. And that was the real import of this morning, not that a disgruntled young Gestapo officer yelled at me, but that I felt no indignation, rather a real compassion, and would have liked to ask, did you have a very unhappy childhood? Has your girlfriend let you down? Yes, he looked harassed and driven, sullen and weak. I should have liked to start treating him there and then, for I know that pitiful young men like that are dangerous as soon as they are let loose on mankind. But all the blame must be put on the system that uses such people. What needs eradicating is the evil in man, not man himself. Something else about this morning, the perception very strongly borne in that despite all the suffering and injustice, I cannot hate others. All the appalling things that happen are no mysterious threats from afar, but arise from fellow beings very close to us. That makes these happenings more familiar than and not so frightening. The terrifying thing is that systems grow too big for men and hold them in a satanic grip, the builders no less than the victims of the system, much as large edifices and spires created by men's hands tower high above us, dominate us, yet may collapse over our heads and bury us. She spent some time, she had to be for 3 hours at a place that was called Lippmann and Rosenthal's, and in the notes it says these were bankers who were appointed by the Nazis to take care of the Jews' liquid assets. First, she says, the tree outside my window in the evenings is a greater experience than all those people put together. I sometimes think so many things happen in my life, so many interesting people, so many books, so much talk. It's a pity I can't write it all down for the years to come. But then my real life is something quite different, hanging about for 3 hours at Lippmann and Rosenthal's. I know they are bullies and thieves, and yet I have never been so close to S, that this is the man whom she loves, and so at peace with him as I was in those 3 hours of waiting. All my pent-up energy and good humor came to my aid, and then it was as if during those hours we grew more inseparable still. Life may be brimming over with experiences, but somewhere deep inside all of us carry a vast and fruitful loneliness wherever we go. And sometimes the most important thing in a whole day is the rest we take between 2 deep breaths, or the turning inwards in prayer for 5 short minutes. Here she says, that was my day. I don't go through the description. That was my day then, a long day. And the most important thing about it all, that the branches of the tree outside my window have been lopped off. The night before, the stars had still hung like glistening fruit in the heavy branches, and now they climbed, unsure of themselves, up the bare, ravaged trunk. Oh yes, the stars, for a few nights some of them lost, deserted, grazed over the wide, forsaken heavenly plain. For a moment, when the branches were being cut, I became sentimental, and for that moment I was deeply sad. Then suddenly I knew I should love the new landscape too, love it in my own way. Now the 2 trees rise up outside my window like imposing, emaciated ascets. Is that how you pronounce it? Ascets or ascetics? Thrusting into the bright sky like 2 daggers. And on Thursday evening the war raged once again outside my window, and I lay there watching it all from my bed. Bernard was playing a Bach record next door. It had sounded so powerful and glowing, but then suddenly there were planes, fire, shooting, bombs, much noisier than they had been for a long time. It seemed to go on right beside the house, and it suddenly came to me again. There must be so many houses all over the world which are collapsing each day under just such bombs as these. And Bach went gallantly on, now faint and small, and I lay there in my bed in a very strange mood. Filaments of light along the menacing bare trunk outside my window. These filaments of light are things that the planes drop in order to illuminate the landscape, to know where to drop the bombs. A constant pounding, and I thought to myself, any minute now a piece of shrapnel could come through that window. It's quite possible. And it's equally possible that there would be a lot of pain. And yet I felt so deeply peaceful and grateful there in my bed, and meekly resigned to all the disasters and pains that may be in store for me. All disasters stem from us. Why is there a war? Perhaps because now and then I might be inclined to snap at my neighbor, because I and my neighbor and everyone else do not have enough love. Yet we could fight war and all its excrescences by releasing each day the love which is shackled inside us and giving it a chance to live. And I believe that I will never be able to hate any human being for his so-called wickedness, that I shall only hate the evil that is within me, though hate is perhaps putting it too strongly even then. In any case, we cannot be lax enough in what we demand of others and strict enough in what we demand of ourselves. Yes, the trees, sometimes at night their branches would bow down under the weight of the fruit of the stars, and now they are menacing daggers piercing the bright spring air. Yet, even in their new shape and setting, they are unspeakably beautiful. I remember a walk along an Amsterdam canal, one dreamlike summer night long, long ago. I had visions then of ruined cities. I saw old cities vanish and new cities arise, and I thought to myself, even if the whole of this world is bombed to bits, we shall build a new world, and that one too will pass, and still life will be beautiful, always beautiful. Even ill-fated Rotterdam, what a bizarre new landscape that city was pounded uncountable times. What a bizarre new landscape, so full of eerie fascination, yet one we might also come to love again. We human beings cause monstrous conditions, but precisely because we cause them, we soon learn to adapt ourselves to them. Only if we become such that we can no longer adapt ourselves, only if deep inside we rebel against every kind of evil, will we be able to put a stop to it. I think it's an incredible insight, the danger of adapting, of becoming used to. Airplanes streaking down in flames still have a weird fascination for us, even aesthetically, though we know deep down that human beings are being burnt alive. As long as that happens, while everything within us does not yet scream out in protest, so long will we find ways of adapting ourselves, and the horrors will continue. Does that mean I'm never sad, that I never rebel, always acquiesce, and love life no matter what the circumstances? No, far from it. I believe that I know and share the many sorrows and sad circumstances that a human being can experience, but I do not cling to them. I do not prolong such moments of agony. They pass through me like life itself, as a broad, eternal stream. They become part of that stream, and life continues. And as a result, all my strength is preserved, does not become tagged onto futile sorrow or rebelliousness. And finally, ought we not from time to time open ourselves up to cosmic sadness? One day I shall surely be able to say to Ilse Blumenthal, yes, life is beautiful, and I value it anew at the end of every day, even though I know that the sons of mothers, and you are one such mother, are being murdered in concentration camps. And you must be able to bear your sorrow, even if it seems to crush you. You will be able to stand up again, for human beings are so strong, and your sorrow must become an integral part of yourself, part of your body and your soul. You mustn't run away from it, but bear it like an adult. Do not relieve your feelings through hatred. Do not seek to be avenged on all German mothers, for they too sorrow at this very moment for their slain and murdered sons. Give your sorrow all the space and shelter in yourself that is its due, for if everyone bears his grief honestly and courageously, the sorrow that now fills the world will abate. But if you do not clear a decent shelter for your sorrow, and instead reserve most of the space inside for your hatred and thoughts of revenge, from which new sorrows will be born for others, then sorrow will never cease in this world and will multiply. And if you have given sorrow the space its gentle origins demand, then you may truly say, life is beautiful and rich. Last night I wondered again if I was so unworldly simply because the German measures affect me so little personally. But I don't fool myself for one single moment about the gravity of it all. Yes, sometimes I can take the broad historical view of the measures. Each new regulation takes its little place in our century, and I try then to look at it from the viewpoint of a later age. And the suffering, the ocean of human suffering, and the hatred and all the fighting. Yesterday I suddenly thought, there will always be suffering, and whether one suffers from this or from that really does not make much difference. It is the same with love. One should be less and less concerned with a love object and more with love itself, if it is to be real love. People may grieve more for a cat that has been run over than for the countless victims of a city that has been bombed out of existence. It is not the object, but the suffering, the love, the emotions, and the quality of these emotions that count. In the big emotions, those basic harmonies are always ablaze, and every century may stoke the fire with fresh fuels, but all that matters is the warmth of the fire. And the fact that nowadays we have yellow stars, as these things that I had to wear, and concentration camps and terror and war is of secondary importance. And I don't feel less militant because of this attitude of mine, for moral certainty and moral indignation are also part of the big emotions. But genuine moral indignation must run deep and not be petty personal hatred, for personal hatred usually means little more than using passing incidents as excuses for keeping alive personal hurts, perhaps suffered years ago. Call it psychology, but we can't let ourselves be led astray any longer. We must look at all that indignation we feel and discover whether its roots are genuine and deep and truly moral. The bare trunks which climb past my window now shelter under a cover of young green leaves. A spring fleece along their naked, tough, ascetic limbs. A springy fleece. I went to bed early last night, and from my bed I stared out through the large open window. And it was once more as if life with all its mysteries was close to me, as if I could touch it. I had the feeling that I was resting against the naked breast of life and could feel her gentle and regular heartbeat. I felt safe and protected. And I thought, how strange. It is wartime. There are concentration camps. I can say of so many of the houses I pass, here the son has been thrown into prison, there the father has been taken hostage, and an 18-year-old boy in that house over there has been sentenced to death. And these streets and houses are also close to my own. I know how very nervous people are. I know about the mounting human suffering. I know the persecution and oppression and despotism and the impotent fury and the terrible sadism. I know it all. And yet, at unguarded moments, when left to myself, I suddenly lie against the naked breast of life, and her arms round me are so gentle and so protective, and my own heartbeat is difficult to describe, so slow, and so regular, and so soft, almost muffled, but so constant, as if it would never stop. That is also my attitude to life, and I believe that neither war nor any other senseless human atrocity will ever be able to change it. And now Jews may no longer visit greengrocers' shops. They will soon have to hand in their bicycles. They may no longer travel by tram, and they must be off the streets by 8 o'clock at night. When I feel depressed about these measures, this morning they weighed on me like a menacing lead mass. It is not really the measures themselves that cause my anguish. Having to give some really awful lesson, she's talking about her Russian lessons, can torment me as much as the worst measures the occupying power can devise. It is never external events. It is always the feeling inside me, depression, uncertainty, or whatever, that lends these events their sad or menacing aspect. It always spreads from the inside outwards with me, never the other way. Generally, the most ominous measures, and there are quite a few of those nowadays, have no power against my inner certainty and confidence, and once faced, lose much of their menace. Here she says, humiliation always involves two, the one who does the humiliating and the one who allows himself to be humiliated. If the second is missing, that is, if the passive party is immune to humiliation, then the humiliation vanishes into thin air. All that remains are vexatious measures which interfere with daily life, but are not humiliations that weigh heavily on the soul. We Jews should remember that. This morning I cycled along the station quay, enjoying the broad sweep of sky at the edge of the city and breathing in the fresh, unrationed air. And everywhere signs barring Jews from the paths in the open country. But above the one narrow path still left to us stretches the sky, intact. They can't do anything to us, they really can't. They can harass us, they can rob us of our material goods, of our freedom of movement. But we ourselves forfeit our greatest assets by our misguided compliance, by our feelings of being persecuted, of being humiliated and oppressed, by our own hatred, by our swagger which hides our fear. We may, of course, be sad and depressed by what has been done to us. That is only human and understandable. However, our greatest injury is one we inflict upon ourselves. I find life beautiful and I feel free. The sky within me is as wide as the one stretching above my head. I believe in God and I believe in man, and I say so without embarrassment. Life is hard, but that is no bad thing. If one starts by taking one's own importance seriously, the rest follows. It is not morbid individualism to work on oneself. True peace will come only when every individual finds peace within himself, when we have all vanquished and transformed our hatred for our fellow human beings, of whatever race, even into love one day, although perhaps that is asking too much. It is, however, the only solution. I am a happy person, and I hold life dear indeed in this year of the Lord, 1942, the umpteenth day, year of the war. The latest news is that all Jews will be transported out of Holland through Drenthe province and then on to Poland. And the English radio has reported that 700,000 Jews perished last year alone in Germany and the occupied territories. And even if we stay alive, we shall carry the wounds with us throughout our lives. And yet I don't think life is meaningless, and God is not accountable to us for the senseless harm we cause one another. We are accountable to him. I have already died 1,000 deaths in 1,000 concentration camps. I know about everything and am no longer appalled by the latest reports. In one way or another, I know it all, and yet I find life beautiful and meaningful from minute to minute. It is possible to suffer with dignity and without. I mean, most of us in the West don't understand the art of suffering and experience a thousand fears instead. We cease to be alive, being full of fear, bitterness, hatred, and despair. God knows it's only too easy to understand why. But when we are deprived of our lives, are we really deprived of very much? We have to accept death as part of life, even the most horrible of deaths. And don't we live an entire life each one of our days? And does it really matter if we live a few days more or less? I am in Poland every day, on the battlefields, if that's what one can call them. I often see visions of poisonous green smoke. I am with the hungry, with the ill-treated and the dying every day, but I am also with the jasmine and with that piece of sky beyond my window. There's room for everything in a single life. When I say I have come to terms with life, I don't mean that I have lost hope. What I feel is not hopelessness, far from it. I have lived this life 1,000 times over already and have died 1,000 deaths. Am I blasé then? No. It is a question of living life from minute to minute and taking suffering into the bargain. And it is certainly no small bargain these days, but it does matter. But does it matter if it is the Inquisition that causes people to suffer in one century and war and pogroms in another? To suffer senselessly, as the victims would put it? Suffering has always been with us. Does it really matter in what form it comes? All that matters is how we bear it and how we fit it into our lives. Am I merely an armchair theorist, safely ensconced behind my desk, with my familiar books around me and the jasmine outside? Is it all theory, never tested in practice? I don't think so. All our conversations are now interlarded with sentences such as, I hope he'll still be there to enjoy these strawberries with us. I know that Misha, with his delicate physique, has been ordered to report at Central Station, and I think of Miriam's and Renate's pale little faces and of many, many worried people, and I know it all, everything, every moment, and I sometimes bow my head under the great burdens that weighs down on me. But even as I bow my head, I also feel the need, almost mechanically, to fold my hands. And so I can sit for hours and know everything and bear everything and grow strong in the bearing of it. And at the same time feel sure that life is beautiful and worth living and meaningful, despite everything. But that does not mean I'm always filled with joy and exaltation. I'm often dog-tired after standing about in queues, but I know that too is part of life. And somewhere there is something inside me that will never desert me again. Very well then, this new certainty that what they are after is our total destruction. I accept it, I know it now, and I shall not burden others with my fears. I shall not be bitter if others fail to grasp what is happening to us Jews. I work and continue to live with the same conviction, and I find life meaningful, yes, meaningful, although I hardly dare say so in company these days. Living and dying, sorrow and joy, the blisters on my feet, and the jasmine behind the house, the persecution, the unspeakable horrors, it is all as one in me, and I accept it all as one mighty whole, and begin to grasp it better, if only for myself, without being able to explain to anyone else how it all hangs together. I wish I could live for a long time, so that one day I may know how to explain it, and if I am not granted that wish, well, then somebody else will perhaps do it, carry on from where my life has been cut short. And that is why I must try to live a good and faithful life to my last breath, so that those who come after me do not have to start all over again, need not face the same difficulties. Isn't that doing something for future generations? Bernard's Jewish friend had them ask me after the last promulgations, "Don't you agree that all Germans should be done away with, preferably hung, drawn, and quartered?" Yes, we carry everything within us, God and heaven and hell and earth and life and death and all of history. The externals are simply so many props. Everything we need is within us, and we have to take everything that comes, the bad with the good, which does not mean we cannot devote our life to curing the bad. But we must know that motives inspire our struggle, and we must begin with ourselves every day anew. There was a time when I thought I had to come up with a host of brilliant ideas each day, and now I sometimes feel like a barren stretch of land on which nothing grows, but which is nevertheless spanned by a high, wide sky. And this way is by far the better. Something has crystallized. I have looked our destruction, our miserable end, which has already begun in so many small ways in our daily life, straight in the eye, and accepted it into my life, and my love of life has not been diminished. I am not bitter or rebellious or in any way discouraged. I continue to grow from day to day, even with the likelihood of destruction staring me in the face. I shall no longer flirt with words, for words merely evoke misunderstandings. I have come to terms with life, nothing can happen to me, and after all, my personal fate is not the issue. It doesn't really matter if it is I who perish or another. What matters is that we are all marked men. By coming to terms with life, I mean the reality of death has become a definite part of my life. My life has, so to speak, been extended by death, by my looking death in the eye and accepting it, by accepting destruction as part of life and no longer wasting my energies on fear of death or the refusal to acknowledge its inevitability. It sounds paradoxical. By excluding death from our life, we cannot live a full life. And by admitting death into our life, we enlarge and enrich it. This has been my first real confrontation with death. I never knew what to make of it before. I had such a virginal attitude towards it. I've never seen a dead person. Just imagine a world sown with million corpses, and in 27 years I've never seen a single one. I have often wondered what my attitude to death really is. I never delved deeply into the question. There was no need for that. And now death has come as large as life, and I greet him as an old acquaintance. Everything is so simple. You don't have to have any profound thoughts on the subject. There death suddenly stands, large as life and part of it. In the afternoon, when the two of us, spoiled bachelors that we still are, sat over a copious lunch at his small round table, a lunch in which the world outside ceased to matter, and I said that I didn't want to leave him, he suddenly became stern and solemn and said, "Don't forget what you always preach, never forget it." And I did not even have the old feeling that I was a little girl acting a role in a play far beyond my understanding, but felt instead that my very life and fate were at stake, and I could accept that with all the threats, the uncertainties, the faith and the love, for it seemed to fit me like some garment specially made to measure. I love him with all the unselfishness I am capable of, and shall not burden him with even the smallest weight of my fears and demands. I shall even relinquish the wish to stay with him to the last moment. My whole being has become one great prayer for him, and why only for him? Why not for all others as well? Girls of 16 are being sent to the labor camps as well. We older ones shall have to take them under our wing when it is our turn, when it is the turn of us Dutch girls. Last night I suddenly felt like saying to Han, do you know that the 16-year-old girls are being picked up as well? And I kept it back and thought to myself, why add to his already heavy burden? Everyone surely knows what is going on, but we must be kind to others and not always saddle them with what we can perfectly well carry alone. A few days ago, I still thought to myself, the worst thing for me will be when I'm no longer allowed pencil and paper to clarify my thoughts. They're absolutely indispensable for me, for without them I shall fall apart and be utterly destroyed. But now I know that once you begin to lower your demands and your expectations, you can let go of everything. It took me just a few days to learn that. Perhaps I shall be able to stay on here for another month, but by that time any loophole in the regulations will surely have been closed. Every day I shall put my papers in order, and every day I shall say farewell. And the real farewell, when it comes, will only be a small outward confirmation of what has been accomplished within me from day to day. I feel so strange. Am I really sitting here writing things down so calmly? Would anybody understand me if I told them that I feel so strangely happy, not bursting with it, but just plain happy, because I can sense a new gentleness and a new confidence growing stronger inside me from day to day? That all the confusing and threatening and dreadful things that assail me do not drive me out of my mind for even one moment? I dare hardly write on. I don't know how to put it. It is as if I had gone almost too far in my dissociation from all that drives most people out of their minds. If I knew for certain that I should die next week, I would still be able to sit at my desk all week and study with perfect equanimity. For I know now that life and death make a meaningful whole. Death is a gentle slipping away, even when gloom and abominations are its trappings. I must go to bed earlier, otherwise I feel sleepy all day and that's no good. I must try to get hold of that letter from our kosher German soldier before Liesel goes to Drenthe and preserve it as a document humane. After dealing out crushing blows, history often takes the strangest of turns. Life is so odd and so surprising and so infinitely varied at every twist of the road, and the whole vista changes all of a sudden. I wasn't able to find the reference to where a German soldier did something very kind. Most people carry stereotyped ideas about life in their heads. We have to rid ourselves of all preconceptions, of all slogans, of all sense of security, find the courage to let go of everything, every standard, every conventional bulwark. Only then will life become infinitely rich and overflowing, even in the suffering it deals out to us. Well, now let's put a lid on all today's tumult, and I'll have this evening to myself in peace and quiet concentration. A yellow tea rose on my desk is flanked by 2 small vases of violets. After our regular evening conversation with the others, S looked utterly worn out and said, "How on earth do the Levies stand it? I can't take it anymore. I feel absolutely awful." As for me, I'm able to put everything, fact and rumor, behind me and study and read all evening. How odd. Not a single one of the day's worries and alarms has followed me here. I sit at my desk untouched, immersed in my studies as if nothing were happening in the world outside. Everything has simply fallen away from me, leaving no trace, and I feel more receptive than ever before. Next week, no doubt, it will be the turn of the Dutch Jews. With each minute that passes, I shed more wishes and desires and attachments. There are moments when I can see right through life and the human heart, when I understand more and more and become calmer and calmer, and filled with a faith in God which has grown so quickly inside me that it frightened me at first, but has now become inseparable from me. And now to work. And the next morning she writes, such words as God and death and suffering and eternity are best forgotten. We have to become as simple and as wordless as the growing corn or the falling rain. We must just be. Have I really made so much progress that I can say with complete honesty, I hope they will send me to a labor camp so that I can do something for the 16-year-old girls who will also be going, and to reassure the distracted parents who are kept behind, saying, don't worry, I'll look after your children. When I tell others fleeing or hiding is pointless, there's no escape, so let's just do what we can for others, it sounds too much like defeatism, like something I don't mean at all. I cannot find the right words either for that radiant feeling inside me which encompasses but is untouched by all the suffering and all the violence. But I'm still talking in too much philosophical. I'm still talking in much too philosophical, much too bookish a way, as if I had thought it all up just to make life more pleasant for myself. And then the next morning, one moment it is Hitler, the next moment it is Ivan the Terrible. One moment it is resignation, and the next war, pestilence, earthquake, or famine. Ultimately, what matters most is to bear the pain, to cope with it, and to keep a small corner of one's soul unsullied, come what may. Here, this is interesting. We must only speak about the ultimate and most serious things in life when the words well up inside us, as simply and as naturally as water from a spring. We must only speak about the ultimate and most serious things in life when the words well up inside us, as simply and as naturally as water from a spring. And if God does not help me to go on, then I shall have to help God. The surface of the earth is gradually turning into one great prison camp, and soon there will be nobody left outside. The Jews here are telling each other lovely stories. They say that the Germans are burying us alive or exterminating us with gas. But what is the point of repeating such things, even if they should be true? Many accuse me of indifference and passivity when I refuse to go into hiding. They say that I have given up. They say everyone who can must try to stay out of their clutches. It is our bounden duty to try. But that argument is specious. For while everyone tries to save himself, vast numbers are nevertheless disappearing. And the funny thing is, I don't feel I'm in their clutches anyway, whether I stay or I am sent away. I find all that talk so cliché-ridden and naive, and can't go along with it anymore. I don't feel in anyone's clutches. I shall always be able to stand on my own 2 feet, even when they are planted on the hardest soil of the harshest reality. And my acceptance is not indifference or helplessness. I feel deep moral indignation at a regime that treats human beings in such a way. But events have become too overwhelming and too demonic to be stemmed with personal resentment and bitterness. These responses strike me as being utterly childish and unequal to the fateful course of events. People often get worked up when I say it doesn't really matter whether I go or somebody else does. The main thing is that so many thousands have to go. It is not as if I want to fall into the arms of destruction with a resigned smile, far from it. I'm only bowing to the inevitable, and even as I do so, I am sustained by the certain knowledge that ultimately they cannot rob us of anything that matters. But I don't think I would feel happy if I were exempted from what so many others have to suffer. They keep telling me that someone like me has a duty to go into hiding because I have so many things to do in life, so much to give. But I know that whatever I may have to give to others, I can give it no matter where I am, here in the circle of my friends or over there in a concentration camp. And it is sheer arrogance to think oneself too good to share the fate of the masses. Later she says, I have been recommended for some sort of soft job with the Jewish council. They had permission to hire 180 people last week, and the desperate are thronging there in droves as shipwrecked people might cling for dear life to a piece of driftwood. But that is as far as I am prepared to go. Beyond that, I am not willing to pull any strings. In any case, the Jewish council seems to have become a hotbed of intrigue, and resentment against this strange agency is growing by the hour. And sooner or later, it will be their turn to go anyway. But of course, by then the English may have landed. At least that's what those people say who have not yet abandoned all political hope. I believe that we must rid ourselves of all expectations of help from the outside world, that we must stop guessing about the duration of the war and so on. And now I'm going to set the table. Everyone must follow the way of life that suits him best. I simply cannot make active preparations to save myself. It seems so pointless to me and would make me nervous and unhappy. My letter of application to the Jewish Council on Yap's urgent advice has upset my cheerful yet deadly serious equilibrium, as if I had done something underhanded. Like crowding onto a small piece of wood adrift on an endless ocean after a shipwreck and then saving oneself by pushing others into the water and watching them drown. It is all so ugly. And I don't think much of this particular crowd either. I would much rather join those who prefer to float on their backs for a while, drifting on the ocean with their eyes turned towards heaven, and who then go down with a prayer. I cannot help myself. My battles are fought out inside with my own demons. It is not in my nature to tilt against the savage, cold-blooded fanatics who clamor for our destruction. I am not afraid of them either. I don't know why. I am so calm it is sometimes as if I were standing on the parapets of the palace of history, looking down over far distant lands. This bit of history we are experiencing right now is something I know I can stand up to. I know what is happening, and yet my head is clear. But sometimes I feel as if a layer of ashes were being sprinkled over my heart, as if my face were withering and decaying before my very eyes, and as if everything were falling apart in front of me, and my heart were letting everything go. But these are brief moments. Then everything falls back into place, my head is clear again, and I can once more bear and stand up to this piece of history, which is ours. She was briefly at this Jewish council. I don't have a I don't have a piece of paper in here. But there's one entry. Nothing can ever atone for the fact, of course, that one section of the Jewish population is helping to transport the majority out of the country. History will pass judgment in due course. As we heard in the introduction, she then volunteered to go to this intermediate camp. In this entry, she's back in Amsterdam. She's very sick in a hospital. And she's writing to someone. We shan't get anywhere with hatred, class. Appearances are so often deceptive. Take one of my colleagues. I see him in my thoughts. The most striking thing about him is his inflexible, rigid neck. He hates our persecutors with an undying hatred, presumably with good reason. But he himself is a bully. He would make a model concentration camp guard. I often watched him standing beside the camp entrance to admit his hunted fellow Jews, never a pleasant sight. I also remember his throwing a few grubby pieces of licorice to a sobbing 3-year-old across the table and saying gruffly, "See you don't get it all over your face." Thinking back, I'm sure it was more awkwardness and shyness than lack of goodwill that made him seem curt. He simply couldn't hit the right tone. When I saw him walking about among the others with his rigid neck and imperious look and his ever-present short pipe, I always thought, all he needs is a whip in his hand. It would suit him to perfection. But still, I never hated him. I found him much too fascinating for that. Now and then I really felt terribly sorry for him. He had such an unhappy, miserable mouth, if the truth be told, the mouth of a 3-year-old who has been unable to get his way with his mother. Now she writes about his background, which we can spare. Here she says, class, what I really wanted to say is this. We have so much work to do on ourselves that we shouldn't even be thinking of hating our so-called enemies. We are hurtful enough to one another as it is. And I don't really know what I mean when I say that there are the bullies and bad characters among our own people, for no one is really bad deep down. I should have liked to reach out to that man with all his fears. I should have liked to trace the source of his panic, to drive him ever deeper into himself. That is the only thing we can do, class, in times like these. And you, class, give a tired and despondent wave and say, but what you propose to do takes such a long time, and we don't really have all that much time, do we? And I reply, what you want is something people have been trying to get for the last 2,000 years, and for many more thousand years before that, in fact. In fact, ever since mankind has existed on earth. And what do you think the result has been, if I may ask? You say. And I repeat with the same old passion, although I'm gradually beginning to think that I'm being tiresome, it is the only thing we can do, class. I see no alternative. Each of us must turn inwards and destroy in himself all that he thinks he ought to destroy in others. And remember that every atom of hate we add to this world makes it still more inhospitable. And this is just a letter written by someone else from this intermediate camp. And there she stepped onto the platform she herself had described only a fortnight before in her own unforgettable way. This is in all these pages. How these transports were. Talking gaily, smiling, a kind word for everyone she met on the way, full of sparkling humor, perhaps just a touch of sadness, but every inch the Etty you all know so well. Quote, I have my diaries, my little Bible, my Russian grammar, and Tolstoy with me, and God knows what else. One of the camp leaders came to take his leave of her and told her that he had used every argument he knew to plead her case, but in vain. Etty thanked him very much, I only wish I could describe for you exactly how it happened and with what grace she and her family left. So here I sit now, a little sad, certainly, but not sad for something that has been lost, since a friendship like ours is never lost. It is, and it endures. The end of the letter he writes, "Be strong, we shall all be back one day, and people like Etty are able to hold their own in the most difficult situations. My thoughts are often with you." And as the last sentence, it says, Etty Hillesum died in Auschwitz on the 30th of November 1943. We will end here for today.